Alien students mocked the human ban. Then they witnessed the truth. The chimes for mid-cycle recess echoed through the grand promenade of the Ethelgard Institute. The sound resonated differently through the auditory sensors of 24 species. Students flooded the vast, curved corridor. It was a marvel of multi-species architecture. Gravity plates shifted to accommodate beings who crawled. Atmospheric generators created pockets of methane for those who couldn't breathe standard oxygen. The promenade was gleaming, sterile, and utterly alienating. It was a monument to a unity Leo Vance had yet to feel. He kept to the edges, a solitary, bipedal figure in a river of carapaced, scaled, and gelatinous forms. His presence was a dissonant note in the Institute's harmonious, interspecies orchestra. Whispers followed him, clicks and chirps that his translator implant mercifully rendered as unintelligible static. He was the anomaly, the student with too few limbs, too soft skin, and a biology laughably dependent on a precise, narrow band of environmental conditions. An oddity, isn't it? A gruff voice boomed behind him. Leo didn't need to turn. Kailrosh strode up beside him. He was a Valkor, and his hulking, four-armed frame was a walking testament to his species' martial pride. His chitinous armor, a natural part of his body, was scored with clan markings that spoke of a long lineage of warriors. He was flanked by Vekan Ar, a smaller, leaner Valkor who mirrored his leader's arrogant posture. "Did you hear the news, human?" Kailrosh sneered. His mandibles clicked in a gesture of amusement. The Terran Defense Corps has been barred from the Orion Spur War Games. A unanimous decision by the Alliance Council. Leo kept his face a neutral mask, a placid expression he'd spent months perfecting. "I was aware." "Of course, you were," Kailrosh bellowed, drawing the attention of passers-by. "Your commanders probably sent you a message on your primitive radio waves, apologizing for your species' cowardice." He gestured dismissively with an upper arm. "It's for the best. The war games are for warriors, not for fragile specimens who break so easily. Your presence would only be a liability." Leo felt the familiar, hot flush of anger, but forced it down. Dignity and respect, he repeated to himself, the mantra drilled into him by the diplomatic corps. "You are here to build bridges, not burn them. Humanity's strengths lie in other areas," he said. His voice even Vekinar snorted, a rasping sound from his respiratory slits. "Strengths like what? Hiding?" The council made the right call. The Orion Spur is no place for cowards. The word hung in the air, sharp and deliberate. Leo met Kailrosh's multifaceted eyes. He gave a slow, deliberate nod before walking away, leaving the Valkor to bask in the laughter of the crowd he had gathered. Professor Orenkor's class on comparative military doctrine was an exercise in controlled chaos. The amphitheater was arranged in a perfect circle, but within it, each student occupied an adaptive environmental pod that shimmered with its own unique atmospheric haze. Leo's pod was a simple nitrogen-oxygen mix, transparent and unremarkable. Across the circle, Kailrosh's was a high-gravity, sulfur-tinged environment that would kill Leo in seconds. At the center of the room, Professor Orenkor floated serenely. They were a cephaloid of immense age and wisdom. Their 8 prehensile tentacles, each tipped with a delicate sensory organ, undulated with a slow, hypnotic rhythm as they manipulated the holographic displays hovering in the air. "Let us begin." Orenkor's voice resonated. It was a perfectly synthesized, multitonal harmony that was the hallmark of their species' formal speech. As some of you have already heard via unofficial channels, the Alliance Council has passed a binding resolution. This resolution concerns Terran participation in the Orion Spur War Games. Every set of eyes in the room, whether compound, multifaceted, or singular, turned toward Leo. He stared at his datapad. He feigned intense interest in the course syllabus he had already memorized. Effective immediately, the professor continued. The Terran Defense Corps is barred from all joint tactical exercises. This decision was reached with unanimous consent from all voting members. Kailrosh's pod amplified the harsh, chittering laugh that erupted from his mandibles. Vekan, his ever-present shadow, joined in.it was Coriana who broke the silence. She sat in a pod that shimmered with refracted light. Her crystalline Lumani form sparkled like a cluster of amethysts. "Professor," her voice chimed a pleasant, Melodic sound. The logic behind the council's decision is unclear. Could you provide the primary justification? Was it a matter of physiological frailty? An excellent query, Cadet Coriana, Orencore intoned. Before they could elaborate, Kale Rosh's voice boomed from his pod's external speaker. The justification is obvious. Look at them. Bipeds with exposed skin, operating on a single circulatory system. Their reflexes are pitifully slow. They are a species built for falling out of trees, not for combat. Their presence would be a disgrace to any reputable military formation. A ripple of amusement spread through the classroom. Even Professor Orencore's tentacles seemed to curl slightly. It was a gesture Leo had come to recognize as the cephaloid equivalent of a wry smile. While Cadet Kale Rosh's assessment is direct, the professor said diplomatically, the official reasoning is more nuanced. Human tactical doctrines have been deemed fundamentally incompatible with established interspecies alliance protocols. Incompatible? Kale Rosh scoffed. You mean ineffective, Professor? A more polite term for useless. More laughter. Leo's knuckles were white where he gripped his datapad. He couldn't let it stand. Not this time. We have a different history, Leo said. His voice was quiet, but carried a firm weight that cut through the mockery. The room fell silent. Our military thinking was not forged in sterile simulations or honorable duels. It was shaped by a world that tried to kill us every single day for 1,000,000 years. Kale Rosh's amusement returned. Ah yes, the primitive death world argument. You speak of this as if it is a source of pride. All species faced evolutionary pressures. Did they? Leo asked. He finally looked up, his gaze sweeping across the pods. Did your worlds have predators that could hunt you by scent from a kilometer away? Plagues that could wipe out 1/3 of your population in a year? Supervolcanoes, ice ages, asteroid impacts? We survived not because we were the strongest, but because we were the most adaptable, the most cooperative, and the most ruthless. Our approach to conflict is a reflection of that reality. He saw Coriana lean forward. Her crystalline form was glowing with focused interest. It was the first time anyone had looked at him with anything other than pity or contempt. He had their attention. Leo's words settled into the quiet classroom. They left a vacuum where the easy mockery had been only moments before. Kale Rosh's multifaceted eyes narrowed. The amusement in them was replaced by a hard, dismissive glare. The Valkor's entire culture was built on the foundation of honorable, strength-on-strength conflict. To a species that saw battle as a sacred right, Leo's talk of environmental hazards and survival-at-any-cost tactics sounded like a pathetic excuse for cowardice. Empty words, human, Kale Rosh's voice boomed. The speaker in his pod was cranked to full volume. You speak of this brutal history as if it grants you some hidden wisdom. Yet the Council, the wisest body in the galaxy, has judged you unfit for true warfare. Your claims are meaningless, without data to support them. He leaned forward, his massive form pressed against the transparent wall of his pod. So, I will make you a proposition. A murmur went through the class. A formal proposition from a Valkor was a serious matter. You claim your tactics are merely different, not weak. I say they are undisciplined and dishonorable. That is why your people were barred from the Orion Spur War Games. Let us settle this not with words, but with evidence. Let us view the incident that led to this ban. Leo felt his stomach clench. He knew exactly which incident Kale Rosh was referring to. The Simex aboard the derelict Star Freighter Odyssey. The event that had sent ripples of shock and disgust through the Alliance High Command. Professor Orencore's tentacles coiled into tight knots. Cadet Kale Rosh, that data is classified under Epsilon-level security protocols. It is not for student viewing. A smug, triumphant clicking emanated from the Valkor's pod. My sire sits on the Alliance Security Committee. My clan lineage grants me provisional access to all Epsilon-level data for educational review. We have a professor. We have a relevant subject. The pretext is sound. He fixed his gaze on Leo. Let us watch the footage from the Odyssey simulation. Let us see this different human approach for ourselves. Then we will see who is making empty claims. I don't think that's a good idea, Leo said, his voice low and steady. He had to shut this down. Kale Rosh seized on his hesitation. Why not, human? Are you afraid? Afraid we will see how pathetically your soldiers performed? Afraid the truth will confirm what we all know? that humans are too soft for the realities of modern combat. No, Leo said, the word sharper than he intended. I'm not afraid of you seeing us as weak. Coriana's chiming voice cut in. Her tone was one of pure academic interest. Professor, from a scholastic perspective, the opportunity is unprecedented. To view the primary data that led to a unanimous council decision would be an invaluable lesson in military politics and interspecies tactical disparity. If Cadet Kailrosh can secure official authorization, it would be a logical extension of today's lecture. Professor Orencourt considered this. The cephaloid instinct for knowledge acquisition was warring with their ingrained respect for protocol. The temptation of such raw, unfiltered data was immense. The logic is sound, the professor conceded. Their tentacles slowly uncoiled. However, such a viewing would require more than your lineage, cadet. You would need the explicit, logged consent of the Institute's dean, Archon Valerius himself. Should you acquire it? Orencourt paused. Their synthesized voice hummed with consideration. Should you acquire it, I will sanction this unique educational opportunity. The challenge had been set. Kailrosh, driven by arrogance and a desire to humiliate Leo, would move mountains to get that authorization. Coriana, driven by pure curiosity, had given him the academic justification. And Leo was trapped. He knew a truth was about to be revealed that would change how everyone in this room saw his species forever. The session chime echoed, releasing the students back into the grand promenade. The energy in the class had shifted from casual mockery to charged anticipation. Kailrosh and Vekinera left without a backward glance. Their stiff posture radiated a confidence that grated on Leo's nerves. The Valcor was already on his way to petition the dean. His victory was all but assured in his own mind. Leo gathered his things, his movements slow and deliberate. He hoped to be lost in the exiting crowd. But a chiming, melodic voice cut through the noise. Cadet Vance. He turned to find Coriana waiting for him. Her crystalline Lamani form seemed to absorb and refract the station's artificial light. It created a small, personal aurora around her. Up close, he could see the complex geometric patterns that made up her body. They shifted in microscopic, intricate ways. You will be there for the viewing, won't you? She asked. It wasn't a challenge, like Kailrosh's. It was a genuine question. It seems I don't have much of a choice, Leo replied, a hint of weariness in his voice. There is always a choice, Coriana countered. Her head tilted in a gesture of analytical curiosity. But your presence would be beneficial. To understand the data fully, we need the context that only a member of the subject species can provide. I wish to understand why your tactics are deemed incompatible. Leo looked at her. He saw for the first time not an alien, but a scholar, a being driven by a pure, unmalicious desire for knowledge. It was a language he understood far better than bravado or intimidation. He felt a strange urge to protect her from the truth she was seeking. Coriana, he said, his voice dropping slightly. What you are going to see, it's not just data. It's a philosophy born from a history your species can't imagine. It's not something we're proud of. It is simply what we became in order to survive. He paused. I'll be there. He gave a slight nod and walked away, leaving her to ponder his warning. Back in the quiet solitude of his personal quarters, Leo opened a secure, encrypted channel on his terminal. The message was brief. To TDC Liaison, Ethelgard. From Cadet L. Vance. Subject, Protocol Compromise. They're going to see the Odyssey footage. The Pandora Protocol may be compromised. He stared at the words for a long moment. The cursor blinked like a tiny, anxious heart. Then he pressed send. The point of no return had been crossed. The secure data lounge was buried deep in the Institute's restricted archives. It was a place where information was currency and access was power. The lighting was low. It cast long, distorted shadows from the various life support pods arranged in a semicircle around a central holographic projector. It was a sterile, silent room that felt more like a surgical theater than a classroom. Leo arrived last. Kailrosh and Vekinar were already in their high-gravity pod. The former's forearms were crossed in a gesture of triumphant impatience. Coriana sat alone. Her crystalline form was perfectly still as she calibrated her pod's internal sensors to record the session. Professor Orenkor floated near the back of the room. Their 8 tentacles moved in a slow, contemplative rhythm that betrayed a deep-seated curiosity. Kale Rosh tapped a command into his pod's interface. The formal seal of the dean's office flashed on the main projector. It was followed by the words, "Educational Review Authorized." As you can see, the Valkor's voice boomed, dripping with arrogance. Archon Valerius agrees that this viewing has academic merit. He activated the playback sequence. The scenario is a standard boarding action against a disabled freighter, the Starship Odyssey. The vessel is defended by autonomous combat drones programmed with standard Alliance protocols. Each species sent a 5-member team to secure the bridge. Leo chose a pod near the exit. The emergency release glowed faintly beside his arm. He felt like a man about to show his family a recording of his own violent crimes. He was braced for the impact, not on himself, but on them. Before we commence, Professor Orenkor's synthesized voice echoed, lending a formal gravity to the moment. Let it be recorded that the purpose of this viewing is purely educational. We are here to observe tactical disparities, not to pass judgment. Their massive head turned slightly towards Leo's pod. Cadet Vance, do you wish to provide any context before we begin? Leo looked at the expectant faces reflected in the dark projector. Kale Rosh was hungry for humiliation. Coriana was hungry for data. Orenkor was hungry for knowledge. He simply shook his head. No, Professor. Leo's voice was quiet. The footage speaks for itself. Kale Rosh let out a condescending chitter. Indeed, it will. With a final tap, he initiated the playback. The air in the room grew thick with anticipation. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the silent, drifting hulk of the Odyssey against a backdrop of stars. The test was about to begin. The holographic display solidified, showing a tactical grid of the Odyssey. The first team to board was the Valkor. 5 blue icons appeared at the main airlock. Their approach was a masterclass in Alliance doctrine. They performed a textbook single-point breach. They established a secure perimeter. They made a methodical, shield-first advance down the main corridor. They met the first wave of drones head-on. Their pulse rifles fired in disciplined volleys. Textbook. Kale Rosh's voice boomed with pride. Power, discipline, and honor. That is the warrior's way. Next came the Lumani team, represented by 5 shimmering purple icons. Their approach was different, more elegant. They used phased energy fields to temporarily disable the drones. They bypassed combat entirely where possible. They neutralized threats with surgical precision. It was clean, efficient, and bloodless. A logical and effective strategy, Coriana noted. Her tone was appreciative of the intellectual rigor on display. Then, the 5 red icons of the human team appeared. They didn't use the main airlock. Instead, they breached the hull at 5 separate, seemingly random points. They've split their forces. Vec and AR chirped in confusion. They're violating the principle of force concentration. What are they doing? The tactical display fractured into multiple windows, following each human soldier. One of them was their designated leader, Commander Eva Rostova. She immediately fired her weapon down an empty hallway. This deliberately triggered the ship's internal alarms. The drone icons on the map, a swarm of angry yellow triangles, began to converge on her position. She's sacrificing herself to create a diversion. Kale Rosh exclaimed. A foolish and dishonorable tactic. The exercise does not reward martyrdom. But Rostova wasn't sacrificing herself. The playback showed her engaging in a running battle. She was not trying to destroy the drones, but simply to keep them occupied. She led them on a wild chase through the ship's maintenance corridors. She was a matador, and the drones were her bulls. Meanwhile, the other 4 human soldiers were not engaging the enemy at all. They were moving swiftly and silently through deserted sections of the ship. Their objectives were unclear until the first environmental alert flashed on the tactical display. Warning: atmospheric evacuation in Cargo Bay 3. Are they venting the ship's atmosphere? Professor Orenkor's voice was strained. The harmony in their speech had cracked for the first time. The display confirmed it. 2 human soldiers were systematically working their way through the cargo holds. They sealed bulkhead doors and then explosively decompressing the sections. The drones inside were not designed for vacuum. They were instantly rendered inert. Their systems shorted out as they were sucked against the outer hull. That is not permitted. Kailrosh roared. His four arms gestured wildly in his pod. They are not fighting the combatants. They are attacking the arena itself. It's cheating. Another window opened. It showed a third soldier in the engineering section. He wasn't destroying the ship's power core. He was rerouting it. Suddenly, another alert flashed. Warning. Artificial gravity failure in sectors 5 Alpha, 7 Gamma. The drone swarms in those corridors were caught off guard. They floated helplessly in 0G, unable to use the floor for traction. Their thrusters, designed only for minor adjustments, were useless for controlled movement. They became a clumsy, floating shooting gallery. The fourth soldier had accessed the ship's fire suppression system, but instead of water or foam, he began flooding the drone-occupied corridors with super-chilled de-icing coolant from the ship's external atmospheric processors. The extreme cold froze the drone's internal mechanisms. It caused their power cells to crack and fail. Leo watched his classmates' faces. The smugness on Kailrosh was gone. It was replaced by a mask of horrified disbelief. Vekanear was silent. His mandibles were frozen mid-click. Even Coriana's crystalline form seemed to have lost some of its luster. Her usual analytical calm was shattered by the sheer, brutal pragmatism of the human tactics. She was the first to grasp the horrifying totality of what she was seeing. Her chiming voice was quiet, stripped of its melody. They are not fighting the enemy, she breathed. The words were barely audible. They are systematically dismantling the environment around the enemy. They are turning the ship itself, into a weapon. The final phase was swift. The vast majority of the drones were disabled by vacuum, zero gravity, or freezing temperatures. The remaining few were still chasing Rostova's ghost. The four soldiers converged on the ship's bridge. They met minimal resistance. The objective was secured in less than 1/3 of the time of the Valcor team. It was done with zero ammunition expended against the primary drone force. The simulation ended. A stunned, ringing silence filled the data lounge. The aliens stared at the blank holographic projector. Their minds were reeling. They had come expecting to see weakness. They had come to witness a clumsy, ineffective force that would justify their mockery. They had not seen weakness. They had seen a species that, when faced with a superior opponent, chose to ignore the rules of the fight entirely. They didn't break the rules. They acted as if the rules never existed in the first place. They saw a species that viewed every component of their environment as another tool to be wielded. The air, the gravity, the temperature, all were another weapon to be turned against their foes. It wasn't a battle. It was a deconstruction. It wasn't dishonorable. It was something far more terrifying. It was post-honorable. It was a cold, clinical, and brutally effective approach to conflict that none of them had ever conceived of. Leo felt a grim, hollow ache in his chest. This was humanity's bloody inheritance. The savage ingenuity born from a world of relentless threats, now on full display for the civilized galaxy to witness. He saw the looks on their faces. It wasn't contempt anymore. It was a new, chilling emotion. It was fear. The holographic display flickered. The tactical grid of the Odyssey dissolved. It was replaced by the sterile interior of an Alliance debriefing room. A panel of high-ranking alien commanders sat behind a long, curved table. Their postures were rigid. Their expressions were a mixture of outrage and disbelief. A Valcor general's mandibles were clenched so tight they looked ready to shatter. A Lumani counselor's crystalline form had gone cloudy with distress. Facing them, alone, stood Commander Eva Rostova. Her Terran Defense Corps uniform was immaculate. Her expression was placid. There was no apology in her eyes, and no hint of shame. She stood with the unnerving calm of a scientist presenting a successful, if controversial, experiment. Commander Rostova, the Valcor general began. His voice was a low growl. You have just completed the simulation. Your team secured the objective. However, your methods were unorthodox. Unorthodox but effective, General, Rostova replied. Her voice was crisp and even. My orders were to secure the bridge with minimal risk to my team and maximum efficiency. I accomplished that objective. The Lumani counselor chimed in, her melodic voice strained. You violated 3 separate articles of the Interspecies Combat Code, Commander. Article 7, prohibiting the weaponization of non-combatant environmental systems. Article 12, regarding unit cohesion. And Article 19, the dishonorable treatment of an opposing force. I am familiar with the code, Counselor, Rostova said, nodding slightly. However, the code is designed for symmetrical warfare between honorable opponents. The drones were programmed with alliance combat logic. To engage them on those terms would have been to fight the battle the simulation's programmer wanted me to fight, not the battle I chose to fight. A real enemy would not be so accommodating. We train for reality, not for theory. A ripple of shock went through the alien panel. The sheer, unapologetic confidence of her statement was as jarring as the tactics themselves. She wasn't defending her actions as a necessary evil. She was presenting them as a superior philosophy. The debriefing recording continued. It brought in the rest of Rostova's team. They stood beside their commander. Their expressions were just as detached, just as clinical. We could have been faster, one of them, a specialist in engineering, stated matter-of-factly. If we had accessed the primary coolant systems for the engines, we could have flash-frozen the entire vessel in under 3 minutes. Far more efficient than corridor-by-corridor decompression. Another team member, the communications tech, added, I also identified a vulnerability in the ship's internal comnet. By creating a feedback loop in their acoustic warning system, we could have generated a sonic pulse sufficient to shatter the drone's primary processing crystals. No need to touch the atmosphere at all. One by one, the humans calmly discussed a dozen alternative approaches. Each one was more alarmingly creative than the last. They spoke of weaponizing the ship's emergency lighting into a focus strobe to overload the drone's optical sensors. They discussed creating an electrical cascade through the ship's floor panels. They theorized about using the ship's own navigation thrusters to induce a high-G spin, crushing the drones against the bulkheads to eye in the viewing room. The students and their professor watched in stunned silence. The combat footage had been shocking, but this was worse. This was a glimpse into the human mind at war. They were not just rule breakers. They were a species that saw a rulebook not as a set of laws to be obeyed, but as a list of expectations to be subverted. They were not simply fighting an opponent. They were systematically unmaking the entire context of the battle. Their problem-solving process was not linear. It was a chaotic, three-dimensional storm of possibilities. Every system was a potential weapon. Every protocol was a potential vulnerability. Kale Rosh stared, his arrogant certitude completely gone. It was replaced by a profound and unsettling confusion. His warrior culture was based on mastering the rules of combat. It was based on perfecting the art of the duel. These humans, they didn't just ignore the duel. They set fire to the arena. They poisoned the water. And then they calmly shot their opponent in the back while he was distracted by the flames. It was a level of pragmatism so absolute it bordered on psychosis. They weren't warriors. They were exterminators. The holographic display winked out. It plunged the data lounge into a dim, oppressive silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the life support pods. For a long moment, no one moved. The casual, brutal brilliance of the human debriefing hung in the air. It was a toxic phantom that had poisoned their assumptions. It was Professor Orenkor who finally broke the stillness. Their tentacles had been coiled into tight, distressed knots throughout the debriefing. They slowly began to unfurl. The synthesized harmony of their voice was gone. It was replaced by a flat, single tone that denoted deep concern. Cadet Vance. The calculated ruthlessness of that approach. Is this typical of human tactical philosophy? All eyes turned to Leo. The weight of their stares was different now. It was no longer mockery or pity. It was something heavier. It was laced with a new, chilling apprehension. When we're outmatched, yes, Leo confirmed. His voice resonated in the quiet room. When an opponent has superior numbers, superior technology, or superior strength, we don't fight fair. We don't fight with honor. We fight to win. That's the only rule that matters when extinction is on the line. Kale Rosh had been so loud and boisterous before. Now he spoke with a subdued, bewildered tone. But there is no honor in such tactics. To win by subterfuge, by attacking the environment, it is the way of a coward, not a warrior. His voice lacked its earlier conviction. He sounded like a student questioning a fundamental theorem of physics that had suddenly been disproven, Leo met the Valkor's gaze. He did not look with aggression, but with a profound, almost weary sadness. Honor doesn't keep you alive. When a hypercarnivore is stalking your young through the tall grass. A code of conduct doesn't fill your belly when a blight has wiped out your crops. On Earth, for most of our history, survival was the only honor that mattered. Everything else was a luxury we couldn't afford. A faint shimmering passed through Coriana's crystalline form. Her analytical mind was piecing it together. She was connecting the scattered data points into a terrifying, cohesive whole. A death world history, she murmured. Her chiming voice was hushed with dawning realization. Directly correlates to a total war doctrine. The willingness to weaponize anything, it isn't a choice for you. It's an instinct, an evolutionary imperative. She looked at Leo. He saw it in her glowing facets, the moment of true understanding. She realized the ban from the war games wasn't an insult or a punishment. It was a quarantine, a necessary separation of two fundamentally different and dangerously incompatible forms of life. One had evolved to play the game of civilization. The other had evolved to survive the apocalypse. Over and over again, the summons came less than an hour later. The entire group was called to the office of Archon Valerius. This included Leo and a still subdued Kale Rosh. The dean's chamber was at the spire of the institute. It was a vast, circular room with a transparent dome. It looked out upon the swirling chaos of the gas giant below. Archon Valerius was a cephaloid of even greater age and size than Orincor. His tentacles were the color of ancient parchment. Each was covered in what looked like scars of wisdom. Professor Orincor has briefed me on your unsanctioned educational session. The Archon's voice resonated through the room. It was deeper and more complex than the professor's. You have viewed the tactical data. Now, you will view the verdict. You will understand the full context of the Council's decision. Without another word, a new hologram shimmered into existence. It was the Alliance Council chamber. It was a place of immense power where the fate of species was decided. Facing the assembled counselors were two human figures. A woman was in the stark, formal attire of the diplomatic corps. A man was in the decorated uniform of a Terran Defense Corps general. Diplomat Thorn, General Carrick, a counselor, was saying, "Your species' performance in the Odyssey simulation was a flagrant violation of every code of conduct we hold sacred." Diplomat Thorn responded, her voice calm. "Our performance was a demonstration of our core philosophy. We do not seek conflict. But when it is forced upon us, we prosecute it with the singular goal of ending it as swiftly as possible. By any means necessary," another counselor challenged. "Your species is too aggressive, too willing to embrace brutality." It was General Carrick who answered. His voice was a low baritone that carried the weight of command. "My species is a survivor, counselor. There is a profound and critical difference." But the most chilling testimony came last. The hologram shifted to an expert witness. It was a Xylosian psychohistorian, renowned for their work on species-level threat assessment. "You must understand," the Xylosian explained. Its reedy voice captured the attention of the entire chamber. "The conflict is not one of technology, or even ethics. It is one of fundamental biology and psychology. Most species in this council evolved as prey or herd animals. Your approach to war is, therefore, an aberration. It is a breakdown of social order, a failure of politics. It is something to be avoided." The psychohistorian paused. It turned its large, dark eyes towards the human delegation. Humans, however, evolved as something else. They were both prey and predator. For millennia, they were middle-of-the-food chain omnivores. They lived on a planet that produced new extinction-level threats as a matter of course. Their psychology is not built on the avoidance of conflict, but on the management of perpetual crisis. The camera zoomed in on the Xylosian. They do not see war as a breakdown of politics. They see it as an extension of biology. They are apex survivors. When threatened, their entire societal structure reorients to face that threat. They will use the rocks, the trees, the air itself as a weapon. They do this because that is what their ancestors did to survive. They cannot be integrated into standard military formations because they do not see the same board. You see a chessboard with rules of engagement. They see a jungle with only one rule: survive. The final vote was called. The ban was enacted unanimously. The hologram faded, Leaving the dean's office in silence, everything clicked into place. The mockery, the dismissal, the ban. It wasn't about weakness. It wasn't about cowardice. It was about a fundamental, terrifying, and irreconcilable difference in nature. The Alliance hadn't barred humanity from the war games out of contempt. They had done it out of an instinct for self-preservation. It was not a judgment. It was a firewall. The group was dismissed. They filed out of the Archon's spire and into the high-altitude corridor. The star-dusted swirl of the gas giant hung like a god's eye in the viewport. The silence that accompanied them was profound. It was no longer the awkward quiet of polite society. It was the heavy, thoughtful silence that follows a fundamental paradigm shift. The universe was the same as it had been an hour ago, but their understanding of it had been irrevocably altered. Vecchar had been Kale Rosh's ever-present echo. He now kept a respectful distance. His posture lacked its usual sycophantic swagger. The other students who had come to witness the humans' humiliation now averted their gaze. Their expressions were a mixture of awe and apprehension. Kale Rosh stopped. This forced Leo to halt as well. The hulking Valkor turned. For the first time, Leo saw no arrogance in his multifaceted eyes. He only saw a deep, unsettling confusion. He stood there for a long moment. His mandibles worked silently, as if searching for words his warrior culture had never needed. He began. His booming voice was reduced to a gravelly rumble. My clan has fought with honor for 1,000 generations. We meet our enemies face to face. We test our strength against theirs. What I saw today, it is not combat. It is a system of eradication. He paused, struggling with the concepts. I do not understand your people, human. I do not think I ever will. Leo simply nodded, accepting the statement. Kale Rosh looked down at his own 4 powerful arms. Then, he looked back at Leo's simple bipedal form. But I no longer believe you are cowards. Without another word, he performed a formal Valkor gesture. It was a sharp, precise bow made by dipping his upper torso and crossing his primary arms over his chest. It was a salute reserved for a respected, if not understood, adversary. Then he turned and strode down the corridor, Vecchar scrambling to follow. Leo was about to move on when Coriana's chiming voice stopped him. She had been waiting patiently. The light refracting through her crystalline body seemed softer now. It was less analytical and more contemplative. The general was right, she said. Her voice was a quiet melody. You are not aggressive. You are survivors. She looked from Leo to the swirling planet outside the viewport. It is a terrifyingly beautiful distinction. The rest of the galaxy has been living in a curated garden, while your species was forged in a wildfire. The council did not ban you for your weakness. They banned you for your strength. The strength to burn the whole garden. Down to survive. She turned her full attention back to Leo. Her multifaceted gaze was intense with a new, urgent curiosity. It was the look of a scholar who had just discovered that all of her foundational texts were incomplete. Leo Vance, she said, using his full name for the first time. The archives here contain terabytes of data on Earth's culture, government, and industry. The sanitized version you present to the galaxy. She leaned closer. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. Could you tell me more about the real Earth? The one that created soldiers like Eva Rostova. In her question, Leo heard the first, faint echo of true diplomacy. It was not the exchange of pleasantries and lies. It was the sharing of a difficult, dangerous truth. He felt the immense weight of humanity's brutal, bloody history settle on his shoulders. But for the first time since arriving at the Institute, it didn't feel like a burden to be hidden. It felt like a story that needed to be told. Leo led Coriana not to a data lounge or a classroom, but to the Institute's observatory deck. It was a quiet, starlit space. It was kept deliberately dark so that the only significant light came from the cosmos itself. Below them, the gas giant's great storm churned in silent, hypnotic majesty. Above, the unfamiliar stars of the galactic core glittered like diamond dust on black velvet. It felt like standing at the edge of the universe. You want to understand us? Leo began. His voice was soft in the stillness. Don't start with our technology or our art. Start with the coal. Coriana's crystalline form remained still. Her entire being was focused on his words. Imagine your world, but every few thousand years, sheets of ice a kilometer thick grind across the land, wiping everything clean. Imagine having to survive. That, not with advanced technology, but with fire and sharp sticks and the sheer, stubborn will to see the next sunrise. That's where our story begins. He told her not of humanity's shining achievements, but of its desperate struggles. He spoke of the predators that hunted them in the dark. Saber-toothed cats with teeth like daggers. Cave bears that could crush a human with a single blow. He described the plagues that swept through their burgeoning civilizations. Diseases born from their own agricultural success, turning their greatest strength into a source of immense suffering. He explained the concept of a supervolcano, an eruption so vast it could blot out the sun for years, forcing a desperate scramble for survival in a world of ash and cold. Our cruelty and our ingenuity are two sides of the same coin, Leo explained. His gaze was lost in the starfield. They were forged in the same fire. We learned to cooperate with an intensity other species find unsettling because the tribes that didn't were wiped out. We learned to innovate with a reckless, frantic energy because the ones who clung to old ways were consumed by new threats. We don't have natural armor or claws or venom, so we made them. Then we turned them on each other. We are the grandchildren of the survivors of a world that did its best to kill us. And then we spent 10,000 years doing the job ourselves. Coriana listened. Her internal light glowed with a soft, steady pulse as she processed the horrifying, compelling data. She was finally beginning to understand. The story of humanity wasn't a triumphant march of progress. It was a desperate, bloody scramble out of a planetary death trap. Their journey to the stars wasn't driven by enlightenment. It was an escape. She realized this quiet, unremarkable human before her was the most dangerous being she had ever met. Not because he was a warrior, but because he was the gentle, civilized descendant of a billion warriors who had won an unending war against their own world. The Institute was designed to teach aliens about each other. But this quiet conversation, in this dark and silent room, was the first and most important lesson Coriana had ever truly learned.